Collected Essays by Valerie Lynn Stevens. On Death. Sometimes I'll be having one of those days where I feel like I can run a marathon. Hell, 2 or 3 in a row. Then I'll think, but maybe that's just nature's way of preparing me for a merciful slaughter. Well, so much for yet another attempt to transcend a keenly disturbing awareness of one's own ever-imminent mortality. But hey, it has its benefits too, I suppose. Being aware of encroaching death, that is. For one, it keeps us grounded, that's for sure. For another, it motivates us to use our time and talents wisely. Well, for some of us it does. The funny thing is, even when I was at the age where I was supposedly supposed to believe myself to be invincible, I was still very much in touch with a sense of my own mortality. I am not a creature of delusion or illusion, but one of realism and reckoning, I suppose. I did a couple of those personality type indicators over the years, and tough-mindedness was in the list of traits akin to those of my kind. Yet I say if it comes naturally to me, I don't deserve that much credit for it, right? But maybe I do, just a little bit. This particular trait has definitely been more of a blessing than a curse, that is for sure. Unlike another trait which those of my type usually possess, namely an eidetic memory. The problem with an eidetic, aka photographic memory, is that on the upside you can remember almost anything. On the downside, you remember everything. Not coincidentally, I don't think, we are diagnosed with anxiety-related conditions, namely PTSD, more than the rest of the population. Although it is not mere overcompensation to recognize nervous disorders as a sign not of imbalance or lack of constitution, but on the contrary, as indicative of superior intelligence and evolutionary capacity. Although it is also true that the more evolved one becomes, the more vulnerable one becomes in the sense of the existential and often vocational and social displacement which one feels being a member of a smaller, higher-minded minority. But everyone feels in their own way a member of some smaller minority. The truth is we are all lonely in each our own ways, but we are not alone in this, our irredeemable sense of solipsistic languishing. But life is beautifully rife with paradox. We must celebrate it, revel in it, work with it, not against it. After all, what we deem paradox is actually the harmonious and optimal integration and unity behind all things, manifesting itself for our own psycho-spiritual edification. Or at least that's one way of looking at it. Contrasts would not be recognized were they facsimiles, would they? Nevertheless, back to the topic of each our own imminent mortality, this too can be viewed as the paradoxical other half of what we call life. But I think that's too reductionist and doesn't really help us to understand either death or life and come to terms with either of them any better. Of course, we possess the technical medical terminology to explain, at least on a strictly biological and neurological level anyhow, both the process of life and the process of death or dying. But again, has this ever really helped anyone to truly come to terms, no pun intended? No, of course not, because a human person is not just a mere cadaver, but is a soul as well. No matter what one believes or does not believe when it comes to the metaphysical issues of this life, the fact remains self-evident. Human individuals are complex and highly vulnerable beings. Our needs run way deeper than typical Q&A type interactions when it comes to that of our own innermost life experiences. It is true that when I am at the doctor's office getting my annual checkup, I often prefer to have a more clinical type interaction, in the sense that I don't want it to get too intimate on an emotional or psychological level with someone that I do not know very well. I also enjoy learning the technical terminology for things, so clinicians don't need to dumb things down for this patient I want all of the graces. However, I have also not yet had a terminal type of diagnosis presented to me in such a situation. I know myself well enough to be able to project myself into an imaginary situation similar to that, but won't actually know how I will react and what my needs will be until the day comes, most likely. As Russian filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky once shared, death doesn't exist for me, really, but I suppose I will feel differently once it's actually here. Exactly. No amount of philosophizing or imagining can truly prepare us for the real thing. Thus, why go on with this here little ditty? We are all going to die some day, and we know not when. I suppose the art of living is mastered in the balancing of form and function, color and light, the will to create, and a surrender to the soul smithing which our Heavenly Father and Creator is masterfully crafting within each and every one of us. Whether we are living to die, or dying to live, or just plain making the most of it all, life is a precious darn gift, and I am so grateful for it. Period.